could spend the next 45 minutes introducing her, but that wouldn't work out too well. I would just say that Precious spoke at our first conference in 2014, and we've been in contact on and off ever since. She also spoke a second time for us. And she had just arrived from a 36-hour flight from Zimbabwe back then, and she was greeted by another mutual friend whose house she was staying at, Jane Hammer, and with no sleep to speak of, she was just welcomed exuberantly, and still didn't have a chance to go to sleep for another how many hours, Precious? But Precious, and not only is she a brilliant trainer and has become a speaker on the global stage from, dare I say, humble beginnings, but she's just one of the most delightful people I've ever met. So I'm pleased, most pleased to be able to share her presence with all of us. You're on.
Okay. It's very bad when people introduce you so well. Puts you under pressure, but that's okay. Hi, everyone. First of all, please just confirm that you can hear me well. I realize I don't have earphones, so that might affect the sound a little bit.
You're fine.
Fine, okay, that's good. And very thankful for all the kind words from Adam and Fred and help from John to actually get this going. I have a little presentation to share, so I'll do a screen share, hoping that we will see it together. Let's see. Okay, do you see that?
Yes.
Yes, yay. Okay, as has been said, I really want to appreciate everyone who is online. I'm hoping that we'll have a good time this morning your time. It's about 16:45 my time. And I'm aware that I have about 30 minutes to talk. And this kind of work really demands that you just keep talking, but I'll just harness every word, in that we will do more talking later on in our workshop. And I think it would be nice if you think you have things that you would like us to discuss at the workshop, so that I also share things that will be of interest with to you. Just write them down on the chat box, and I think John will help me collect those. And it's something that I can at least look at, so that the next session will be very helpful and useful. It is my greatest privilege to share with you from home, actually. I figured out smooth internet recently when Adam said, well, now that nothing is happening physically because of COVID-19, we think that you should still join the conference. And it's a miracle that we can still do this. You know, it shows that the human race really remains unstoppable. And I hope that in this movement too, we can remain as unstoppable. Okay, so quickly about myself. Really, this afternoon, I'm just sharing small nuggets of the work that I've had the privilege to be involved in. And I'm sure there's many more others who have equally incredible stories, but I'm really thankful for the platform that has been afforded me. I work with a group called Regeneration International. That's first of all. I'm their Africans coordinator, steering committee member. Through this group, there's a group of fired up people who have a passion to really just spread the word on regenerative agriculture. And I'm sure we all know what that is on this platform. It is a new agricultural approach. The word has been a buzzword all over. And this approach seeks to really revamp and revive economies, businesses, towns, communities, at the same time, while not contributing to global desertification or global climate change. And it's my privilege to work with this group. We support and lobby, and we rally behind farmers. We support network growth, especially network growth, because we realize that this work will take more than just one small group of people doing work. It needs a global effort. And then I'm also a field professional in holistic management attached to the Savory Institute. I'm accredited with the Savory Institute, another incredible platform. I heard that someone is doing some work on holistic management. They are also to go to group of people, you go, they have courses online, and it's a whole group of us, farmers, educators, and then here back home, I work with a small network called Earth Wisdom that I founded as I was growing, to really just keep sharing and inspiring both my people and people in the Southern African region, and recently started stepping out into the East African region, which was also a totally different atmosphere, because I get to work with tribal lands, and maybe we can share those stories later in the evening if you want to know more about the cultural diversities. And thankfully, being a holistic management educator, it's almost a given that each community is different, and you want to weave yourself into that living system and learn from them while you share also the little that you have. Okay, so through Earth Wisdom, I've engaged sometimes with partners here in my own rural communities that I continue to work with. I'm also a smallholder farmer, doing just recently small stock, goats, sheep, and chickens in a rural homestead, because I think it's important to walk the talk, though it's not easy to access the resources to actually walk the talk. But we have a privilege that most of our country's land is communal, and so it's state-owned, but it's also ours tribally. So I get to have that little space where I can have a bit of food that I grow for myself, a bit of poultry and goats and sheep. So that's a little bit about me. And I'm based in Zimbabwe. I live in a small, beautiful town called Victoria Falls. And just for the record, our water levels at the Victoria Falls, just Google them, Victoria Falls, Zimbabwe. It has hit the record that we haven't hit in 50 years, and there's no one to see it. It's a small touristic town, and they're showing off, but there's no tourist to come view them. So I can say the Vic Falls are thriving. Okay, so to start off our talk, I'll read for us this little quote, which is by Alan Savory, which has really inspired me, especially during this time of the COVID-19. I think we might as well talk about it, how that looks like here, and how is it affecting our people, how is it affecting our communities, and what lessons are we learning from it? Before I read, I'll first of all say that I think everyone, be it in the city or in the rural communities, we are realizing that this COVID-19 sort of naturally drew us back to look down to the soil again, realizing that we cannot have a livelihood, we cannot have food outside our own land. I think we had the comfort of having food coming into our country from South Africa, from Botswana, and it was a matter of, oh, I'll just run to the supermarket and get my food. But then now that all borders are closed, and my country, Zimbabwe, has been going through a lot of economic and of course climate challenges, we don't have enough food storages in our own silos. Silos are food storages or granaries, big country storages. So you realize that there's a big food stress, and I'm in a team called the Rapid Response Task Force Team for Food Security. Every week we realize that the numbers of people that need food in our region alone are increasing, ever increasing. And we are looking out for spaces where we can grow gardens. I'm looking forward to the next talk. I'll plug in and see what others are doing anyway. So we're trying to grow vegetables so that people can have an access vegetables at the most basic. So I'll read this quote. It says, ultimately, the only wealth that can sustain any community or economy or nation is derived from the photosynthetic process, which is green plants growing on regenerating soil. This is what will ultimately sustain our world. And I feel like all of us in this group and everyone who didn't manage, maybe everyone who will watch this later, this is the message that we should carry with our hearts, that we would rather die than not have our economies dependent on ecological processes that are thriving. Why am I saying this, especially at this time? I realize that most people were on their farmsteads or homesteads. For now, everyone's hunkered down wherever the lockdown happened. So I'm in town at home. I can't access the rural area right now. So it's easy for every farmer to look down and say, no, I am fine. I have my small piece of land. I can produce my eggs. But then COVID-19 is teaching us that actually for Team Humanity, it's either we sink or swim together. So we need beyond just people in farmsteads understanding the importance of supporting regeneration. We need our consumers supporting it. We need policy, government, taking it with the same emergency that they did the COVID-19. You can realize that globally, the effort has been huge to tackle, to block COVID-19. It's a crisis and everyone's finding things to do. Some of the decisions are working and some of them don't work, especially in countries like mine. It cannot be uniform, but I think each country has to think of how best can we flatten the curve or help our people not be sick in large numbers. I think it needs that global effort. The same effort is needed for addressing climate change, food shortages, and food insecurities. So I thought this was really resonating with what we are going through currently as humanity. And if we are to win together, everyone needs to have that understanding. Please keep typing your questions. I think I'll see them after. For now, I'll just go through our slides. So I think, Adam, you can tell me what time I'm stopping so that I don't just keep going. Okay,
you have about 20 minutes.
I have about 20 minutes, that's great. Okay, so holistic management, which is what sorry, that's my puppy. I don't know what's going on. A simple decision-making framework. I heard that some people are interested in holistic management. We can talk about it much later. This helps us to manage the web of economic, social, and biological complexity. I know that most people, when they've heard holistic management, they've usually jumped into the tools of holistic management and called them holistic management. But it's actually a decision-making. It's simple and can be used by anyone, whether is it for your home, your business, your company, for the economy, for the country, and for the world, before you go into tools. But I think we usually associate it more with livestock because of the background of Alan Savory, who actually pondered more and learned more about holistic management when he was finding and digging on the answers of how to reverse desertifying rangelands in Africa. So that's how people usually quickly link it to the tools. But then it's not just a set of practices, which is what I think we should also have in mind when we're talking about regeneration. It's a framework, it's a frame of mind before the tool sets that are applicable in each and every circumstance and situation. So that was just a little side note. I personally work with agro-pastoral farmers, which is both cropping and livestock farmers. So I work mostly on a bigger landscape level. And I think we have a lot of interface and what you call those interconnections with agroforestry, with permaculture and everything. But I work on a much broader and bigger landscapes using animals as tools of regeneration, as tools of restoration. I work with herders, which is a group of interesting young people. The middle photo is a selfie. They love selfies. So after you've worked, they want a photo. In my work, I've learned that it is important to link with the leadership of the community, livestock farmers or the farmers themselves, and then the young generation, which is mostly herders, who are the ones who spend their time with the animals out in the range. Why is it important to connect with herders more than sometimes your everyday relationship with the actual farmers? The herders are the ones who make everyday decisions on livestock, on land, and water. They are the stewards. It is beyond just going behind animals. But this culture of herding has been, reduced to just a thought of, oh, you failed in life, so you are going to be a herder instead. And my lesson has been, let me and others, some of my colleagues who are working in the same field, let us really reboot and bring back the dignity of the herder. So that's why we become friends eventually, and we learn together very well. But I also work with partners who are, sometimes they are safari organizations who have community projects, and you introduce the idea of regeneration on a broader scale, and they can fund a community training, and then my role is to coach and mentor those communities. Okay, so today we're telling stories of transformation or stories of hope in communities on the front lines of climate change or harsh weather changes that have been happening. This is one of my favorite photos. I couldn't believe when I saw it. This was after a training in East Africa, Kenya, in the north, working with the Samburu tribe. This is a group of women, incredible people. This was a celebration after our workshop when we had done our visions and creating a vision for these vast desertifying lands. These communities live in the front lines of insecurity, food insecurity, and a threat of cultural decay, because they are dwellers on the land. They depend on animals 100%. But every time, because the rangelands are decaying or desertifying, they see themselves hopeless and they do not see that there's a future. And I worked with a partner there, Gravis Zebra Trust, who said, you could come and inspire these communities. And it's the people who lead these communities are elders and male, and their importance cannot be underrated. The next set of very important people would be the warriors, which are younger men. And then the women usually follow the leadership of the elders. And it was my greatest honor and big lesson to stand before the elders and actually share lessons of land regeneration and visioning and rebuilding that confidence in their culture, while I was also learning from their own culture. So we're going to talk about those transformative stories. So the first important part when you're going to bring transformation of any kind in a community, for me, I have learned the importance of elders or the leadership, community leadership. These are leaders, and this was after one workshop. When you enter into a community, your first door or your doorkeepers are the leaders of that community. Find out who they are. And in most cases, it's mostly village heads, chiefs, and those structures that communities have created. And my first point of call in this case, in this picture, was to share with a group of leaders who are managers of a conservancy. Once they understood, then we went to like 10 other small regions that are under the leadership of these guys. And so their agreement and their understanding of the concepts are then important to start rolling out. When you go to the communities, the first thing is explore the current situations. And these are photos from Zimbabwe at the peak of rain season. This was the last rains. So you can see the rivers are desertifying, or they flash flood and they do not contain any water in the midst of rainy seasons. And you explore these with communities so that they first acknowledge that there's a problem. let me share with you why we need to acknowledge that there is a problem. A younger generations like mine, or some people who are younger, they've never seen these lands in a better shape. So this is where you bridge the generational gap between the elders and the youths. The elders will tell stories that this river used to have fish. We used to swim in this stream. We used to have clean water from this stream to drink. And the younger generation has never seen that before. And then they talk about how their crops are failing. The most important thing to most communities is water and food security. And then to pastoral communities is the well-being of their livestock. Is there enough grassland? Is there enough range for their animals to thrive? And then from there, you want to bring people to a space where they then think, how did we get here? And most of the times it's really hopeless when they describe where they are. And then you want them to say, how did we actually get here? You want to unpack the fact that our everyday decisions have brought us to where we are now. And that's the complexities of our actions and how our environment responds to us in return. And then from there, this has been one of the most challenging exercises in trying to facilitate regeneration in communities, or trying to bring back hope. A dare to dream. I call it a dare to dream because if people are stuck in a difficult situation, it's almost impossible for them to see themselves out of a situation. And usually we do it in drawings, but I took some pictures of some of the most beautiful places and where we have implemented and where we have trained, so that you see it visually as well. A dare to dream is what we call a holistic context, which is a vision for our community that we spell out. This is what we want, the life that we desire, whether we have it now or not. And we do not know how we will get there, but we are spelling out what we want, what we desire, what we value. And it can be something like, we desire a clean environment with water and abundance of life. We desire well-being in our livestock and animals. We desire happy and healthy families who own livestock. We desire working together as a community. We desire to be secure in food. That is the one with the crops. And when they spell that out, so I just put it in photos so that you can follow it pictorially. After that, we agree that this is what we have spelled out. This is where we want to go as a community. And now my role, or a role of a facilitator, becomes now understanding ecosystem processes. Actually, how is our land working? What have we done to bring our land here? Or what processes are responsible for reviving and bringing back this ecosystem that we said we desire? And this takes a lot of effort. You need maximum participation of all ages and age groups. Then you do capacity building, visuals. People connect to visuals. And sometimes it's a lot to manage big groups. So you can see sometimes we sit in circles in a community where it works. That's a community in Zimbabwe to your right. On the left, I was working with a community in Kenya where men, older men, young men, and women cannot mix. And you have to work within that cultural context. So it's good to have your ways of facilitation. In a flexible community, you can implement them. But in a set structure, you want to work within that structure and make it work still. And we draw our maps so that people understand their own land and their own landscape. We plan holistic plant grazing. We use holistic plant grazing because it is enabling us to manage complexity. Simple, but very detailed. And any herder or any elder can follow it to see where the animals are according to the divisions that these communities have drawn for themselves. This is one of their most incredible skills, to map out their own land, and they understand it, and you capture their hearts when you allow them to actually draw their own landscape. You have your groups to involve. Sometimes you can be in a room, sometimes you can be out in the wilderness, whether you've walked for 15 kilometers or 20 kilometers, you have to be present. And sometimes you are in a space with no hope, insecure, with a group of women looking at a massive rangeland with no grass. Involve all those groups, get talking until everyone brings their animals together, and the leaders, remember, they continue helping and guiding the process. When implementation has happened, you celebrate small victories. For example, we have changed our soil content. Look at this soil at the bottom there. This is a community that picked up their soil. It's usually sandy and red. It's just next, it's about 30 kilometers from where I am. It's one of the communities that I've been working with and mentoring and coaching. And after implementing animal impact using cattle, they literally changed the soil structure and color. You can see that to the right, the soil is more alive. This is a rangeland that was bare and had nothing, but now you have grass. Even if you have plant spacing that is bigger on the land, but they never had that amount of grass. You celebrate food security. You do what we call food fairs and then seed fairs, because they then collect their seeds and they preserve them. So we're starting small seed banks. Let's share the seeds amongst the women especially. And then what can we do to support? How can the world support this amount of work? You can support by helping communities go to inspiring places. Like, for example, here in Zimbabwe, we have the Africa Center for Holistic Management, which is a savory hub where it's almost an oasis, totally different from outside communities. And people can go, look, and learn. And sometimes a community can visit another practicing community, look and learn to keep the story of hope going. You can support by sponsoring mentors like that lady there at the top. There are small groups of people who are community voices, who are lamps of that hope, who desire to keep training others and inspiring others. A small enablement for these kinds of voices, because when there's deep community ownership, things really get moving. And it doesn't put pressure on a facilitator or in a nonprofit organization, because I think things must be community owned. You can support by providing small things like crows for communities to impact their land and their crop fields. You can also support by spreading word on organizations that come together to support networking, to support just the growth of voices in the civil society that want to influence, especially policy. We need our governments to know how to support regeneration, because every year we realize that we keep having decisions of industrial agriculture being brought to farmers. And it's almost like you're working against governmental programs, which is not the case. So for now, from me to you, that's just a little story that I had to share with you guys. I hope that I'm okay time-wise, and we can chat if people have questions, and I can answer some questions.
Your timing is perfect, Precious.
Thank you.
And so please put questions into the chat box. We can try just unmuting ourselves one at a time and see how that works. And let's go back to viewing one another. Okay. So do we have any questions?
Yes,
or
I
comments?
see some question. Let me, okay. This is so cool. I can't believe that we're doing this actually. Okay, let me, okay. Could Precious describe what the initial meeting with elders is like? It's from Barbara. Okay, so I'm going to give it a go, and then others can keep typing their questions. So there are a couple of points of entry in communities. First of all, you can be invited by a partner organization that is already working with that community. Maybe they've suggested that, oh, we have seen this example working, especially when they refer to the Africa Center, and they can say, oh, okay, we need someone to come and train us. So our recommendation is always, before we roll it out to the broader community, let us meet up with first the elders. And what you do with the elders is to explore, how do they feel about their current life now? And they'll describe how they feel. Is this how you used to live before? Yes or no? And if you are in the north, for example, in the northern Kenya, and you're meeting with a group of mostly male, I learned that you also have to introduce yourself from your tribe, and how do you link with the land from your tribe. For example, my tribe is Ndebele, Nguni tribe. My ancestors were cattle people, and they ran behind animals all their life, and they were warriors, they were very brave. So you will know that every time people went to war, they would bring in herds of animals. If you're talking to pastoralists, that's very important, to be known that you're from a brave background, and you know anything at all about livestock and animals. My birth surname is Dube. I'm a zebra, which means I am related to the wildlife of zebra. So my tribe would then have a role of making sure that everything was okay with zebra. If zebra was edible meat, my tribe wouldn't eat zebra because we are related to zebra. So you share with them all that, and they will tell you that we need to know you, because when you live here, we mark our time. We do not have the calendar, but we say in the days when Precious came here, Precious from the Nguni people, you want to relate to their culture. So depending on the culture that you are dealing with, you handle the elders that way, and respectively keep asking them questions until they unpack their wishes and what is in their heart, and you introduce what your work is about and how you have seen their land and how you can actually think that the community can improve or regenerate the landscape. And usually they'll say, oh, great, then we'll give you the next set of leaders. Then the next set of leaders gives you to the next set of livestock owners until you get to the headers. So I hope that is helpful. And so it depends on which group you are dealing with.
That was very helpful. Thank you.
Thanks. And then, has COVID-19 started where you are? It has, but I think because our health system is not well equipped, we don't have the whole country, we just have two testing centers. And the nearest testing center from where I am is 5-hour drive away. So we have about, I think, 20 cases and only 4 deaths. But we fear that there is a lot more cases because there's been lots of cross-border activities with a country that has been hit, South Africa, where we depend on economically. So the cases have started, and we are just holding forth, hoping that it will not multiply, because information is going around, but we do not have the actual testing. So it's even difficult to say we have 23 cases. We might have more. And we fear that if the stay home lifts off, it may actually spread. We don't know. Okay. And then I have Robert, who says, can I advise about how holistic management can be applied to life in urban areas. How much time do we have?
You've got about 10 minutes.
About 10 minutes. Okay, so maybe let me just quickly tackle it by saying to Robert, I think in urban areas, each community of people, and it can start from just one cluster of family, understanding that my actions, as a family, we are a whole, and our actions will affect our neighbors, eventually our town, and then our country. So as a family, you can have what we call a holistic context, which defines your values, the type of life that you want, even if you're in an urban setting. And this gives you a realization that we do not exist in a vacuum on our own. And maybe that's when after you've drawn out your values and the life that you want, and maybe the future that you envisage for your city, that's what helps you then think of what tools can we use to better the air quality, for example, to better the food supply from our local gardens. Maybe we want to support small businesses. You spell it out all from your holistic context. And then that's what usually when you work with the municipalities or county governments, I don't know what you call them there. And then that context is what helps you think of alternatives that you need to tackle. Sorry, this is really quick because of our time. How many communities would you estimate are now food secure based on your work? Okay, so let's see. I would say at least my work has impacted how many communities? First, from the Africa Center's perspective, I think we had 22 communities. And currently, as an individual, I'm using an approach of coaching and mentoring. And so I reach lots of communities through partners and through myself. But what I can tell you is that they have far much more harvest than an ordinary community that doesn't have. So immediately on my hands right now in this very year, because our rains came in late and we had longer dry spells, I have 3 communities, which is they have food for at least 5 to 6 months compared to others who have less than 3 months food supply, especially with amounts of people also that have come out from the city going to rural communities because of COVID-19. People lost their jobs. So it's gonna shake a bit of the food security in the communities. Let's look at how much land is in your community and how many people does the agriculture support? So Zimbabwe has about 70% of its population being rural. And each community has about 200 households. By community, it's small clusters. So you have a community and you have a ward. So a ward has 6 communities, 6 to 10 communities. So you can imagine about 1,200 households across the spectrum. So each community of about 200 people has at least 2,000 hectares of land. And that's what they plan on. Some of that land is cropland, and some of it is grazing land, and some of it is homestead land. But when you draw your maps, you put all the land as potential grazing land, and then they define, oh, these are homesteads, these are croplands, and these are the broader grazing lands, these are wildlife areas. So yeah, it's about 2,000 hectares per community. Okay. And then someone says, Philip, if we would like to support this kind of work financially, who should we support and which are the most effective organizations? I think there is a lot of effective organizations. I really prefer small organizations who have almost a direct contact with communities, because what I've learned is with big organizations, sometimes finances get swallowed up in what you call administrative charges. So there are lots of small organizations that have an intimate relationship with communities and they keep yeah, your funds can go directly to buying something. For example, I gave an example of buy a boma for the community, which is a crawl. So you've supported that. It can be one time, it can be continuous, depending. You can support a mentorship program for a live wire, a community live wire, which is a community coach. So I can coach that person, and then they go for a training at the Phiri Center. You pay for them a minimum amount, and then they get trained, and they continue the work in the community. So I prefer those kinds of intimate supports, because I think that way the work will really grow. How many other coaches, trainers, mentors like you are in the area? There's a diverse amount of people. We have a whole training center, the Phiri Center, Africa Center for Holistic Management. And we have small organizations called Soft Food Alliance, African Bush Camps. Do you guys hear me? Oh, okay. Something happened to my screen. Okay. So there's lots of organizations where you can actually just plug into, and these organizations, I work with them, and they work with the Africa Center as well to keep gaining holistic management knowledge. Let me go back to the chat box. Okay, we're back at the chat box. Related to Philip's question,
just around 2 more questions.
Okay, 2 more questions. All right. What is effective at helping food producers, those who care for animals and tend crops and soil, feel like their work is valued? I don't feel like their work is valued in their community. Like I said earlier on about the herders, for example, they didn't feel valued unless and until maybe as a coach or mentor, you spend your time to support them, sometimes emotionally, and you can have small projects that support the bigger regeneration project. I've seen other organizations that have gotten funding. They start bee projects, they start permaculture gardens, you know, small pockets of economic boosting. Some start beadwork for the women who have bombers in their fields. So you want small pockets of work that support and enable the bigger and longer term regeneration. I think that's what will bring the ultimate value, because you also face that communities keep going back to the city to find jobs. But I think now everyone's being referred back to the soil so that we get our food from there. Related, Jane. Hi, Jane. It says, how do we support you in your work or support those you have trained through you? I think we can arrange so that you can pay for a mentorship program for a community. You can support, like, even small things like buying raincoats for herders, because when it rains, it's really rough in the field. So little things like that. And we can talk further when we are probably out of the chat. I think I tried. If I missed any question, I'm really sorry.
Well, then you'll just have to come back next year.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Precious, thank you so much.
Thanks.
And we look forward to your workshop in the afternoon.
Okay.
So Paula, do you want to introduce our next speaker?
Yes, I would be very happy to do that. We first met Sven Peel, watched him, in fact, at a number of NOFA conferences where he